and welcome to another episode of FooBar. In today's episode, we are going to get in depth in AWS SAM and all kind of things serverless. If you want to know more about serverless, cloud computing, or software engineer practices in general, subscribe to this channel in the red button below. I post videos on Tuesdays and on Thursdays, so let's get started. This is another episode in my series. This is not a podcast, and today I'm going to speak with Eric Johnson. He talks about SAM. He's the SAM man in all the AWS events. You might have seen him around. He's have a Twitch every week where he talks about SAM and all kind of things serverless. So this is a talk about that. We will go through different things that you can do with SAM and some more complex things that I have in my mind and I want to ask him. It's a pretty fun talk, so let's get to it. Hello and welcome to another episode. Today I have an amazing guest. Sometimes I wonder why he's not wearing his squirrel costume today with me, but you, I'm pretty sure, know him. Eric Johnson, the Senior Developer Advocate for Serverless at AWS. This is going to be a tough interview because we just need to stay on topic and it's going to be very hard. So welcome,
Eric.
I
don't think either one of us are good at that.
Nope. Yeah. I was trying to get an outline from you and let's see what we got out from here. Because we can talk about anything.
Yeah. See, I'm already talking over you. I apologize.
Don't worry. I'm Latino. I'm used to that.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on this. I have, I'm going to say this, in a lot of my learning SAM, before I even started AWS and learning things, your videos always came up. So I'm starstruck right now. So
yeah.
I appreciate
I'm very good at SEO. I always try that. When you search serverless, my face is the first thing that you see.
There it is. You're right. Exactly. So very cool. Excited to be here.
That's really good for me. I'm very, very happy that you accepted. And today we are going to talk mostly about the DevOps part of serverless, because I think that's at least one of the things that I hear you speak a lot about SAM and about how to do things, I think, in production projects. We will go into some of the details that a lot of you that have been watching my content ask me these questions, so I'm really excited that you are giving answers to those questions.
I will do my best.
Yeah, and it'll be fun. But the first thing I want to say is congratulations. SAM has generally available in the 20th of July. Yeah!
Right, that's right. I'm so excited. It is generally available. That was a couple weeks ago. And that means some cool things.
What it means.
And I'll just go for it here. With SAM GA, a couple things wrapped around that. Number one is one of the things that happened is we went to our own Docker image for SAM CLI when you're running local. We were using Michael Hart, which was an amazing image. Thank you, Michael Hart. But we did go to our own, and we are pushing our own on that, and so we're able to flex on that. And do a lot of work there and be flexible there. It also means that there's always been a team wrapped around SAM, but when going GA, it means, hey, this is funded, this is a thing, we're going forward with this. This isn't a beta test. We're going forward, building forward. We've got project managers, we've got the STEs in line, and so you're going to see SAM really starting to blow up and a lot of functionality coming to it. And so, I'm pretty excited about it being GA.
It's been kind of funny product because I didn't know it was not GA until you told me when we were prepping. I was like, really? Yes. This has been used in production in so many companies?
It is. Well, I think one of the confusing parts is SAM Transform, which is the templates, that has been GA for better part of a couple of years now. But the CLI, which is kind of the sidekick to it or the partner to it, that's what went GA. So I think there's some confusion on that sometimes. But I've been using SAM and SAM CLI almost since the day it came out.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes when we think about SAM, we think not only about the transform, but we think about the CLI, that they are one thing together. But that's really cool. So let's go into our main topic, and this is something that came out from me trying to do some webinars and some things during the summer, that is building projects with SAM. I think when we build a hello world, it's always very easy. We do hello world, we put 2 or 3 functions, everything works fine. But what happens when we want to do something more complicated?
All right. Yeah. Isn't it funny how the things we teach are the things we struggle with? You know what I mean? The whole thing with SAM is how do I make this work? And that's why I started teaching it, because they say, if you teach it, you have to learn it. But
exactly.
Project structure, or I'm sorry, building applications with SAM, and really what we're talking about is a lot of times project structure, right?
Yeah.
How do I structure an application that can scale, that is manageable?
Exactly.
And this isn't really, it's not so much a serverless battle, it's a development battle. I mean, we've seen it for a long time. It's, how do we?
But I think with serverless, the case of microservices exponential now, because before we have the problem how we structure our microservice architecture, and now we have these tiny functions, and then it's like, well, functions should be independent from one another, how I put them together, how I compose these applications. So maybe we can, at least you can share what is the best or your best idea on how to do it.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm gonna throw in some code if that's okay. So I'm gonna share my screen.
Go for it.
Alrighty. So with SAM, one of the things that I often, when people come to me and go, how do I structure my application? How do I set this up? And one of the things that I often tell folks is take a gander or take a look at how the templates, the SAM init templates work. And I'm going to walk through a couple of those. And if you're not familiar with this, I'm going to actually show you kind of how it works and kind of get your head wrapped around this. But there's a couple of different ways that we set up architectures, and we're going to talk about kind of where things are located. And one of the things you want to talk about also is kind of mono repo and stuff.
Yes.
And this will kind of set that.
Maybe
right. This kind of sets that base for it. So yeah. So I'm going to show you 2 different kinds of builds. So I'm using my Cloud9 environment here, and let's just get rid of this for the moment. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a SAM init. Now, all my examples are going to be in Node, and there's different templates for different languages, kind of depending on what you want to do. But you kind of get the idea, because what we're looking at is not the code. We're looking at architecture structure.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't
so
matter
I'm going to do a
code use.
Right. I'm going to do a SAM init here, and I'm going to do the AWS Quick Start templates, and these are the templates I'm talking about. Okay, and there's quite a few for each of the language, so I'm going to choose one. We'll do that too a little bit later. I've got something I'm going to show you here. So I choose one, then it's going to ask me the languages. I'm going to choose one. I'm going to use Node.js 12x. You're Node also, right?
Yeah,
I'm
always do Node.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay. All right. But there's lots of different languages we can do. Then I'm going to name it. So we'll just call this SAM App 1. So like this. I like to spell it out here. There we go. SAM App 1. I have no idea why I did that. So here's the examples. We've got the hello world function, we've got the step functions, sample app, so on and so forth. I'm going to do the hello world. And I know you're saying, well, we can all build a hello world. But I want to look at the structure for a minute. Because this, like I said, this is the hello world. So let's go over here real quick. And let's go into SAM app 1. And I want to bring up the template first. First thing let's do is let's look at the actual application structure. And this is how they set it up. You see in here, we've got a folder called Hello World. That's my one and only function. Yes. And in that Hello World, you'll see my tests are there. So I can actually run unit tests here, as well as my package manager. And in Node, that's package.json. Okay, so how this particular application is packaged is each function is its own little application, right?
Yeah.
So I can work with those, and so here's the thing about that is all the dependencies for Hello World would need to be in the Hello World folder. All the, and so that's how it references it, right? And so looking at the template, some things to notice that I want to explain is first of all, let's talk about the code URI. The code URI says where is the package manager for this application. That's the root of the function, right?
Yes.
And for us, it's Hello World. Okay, and then it says, now where's the handler? And the handler is always constructed by the function or the file name, and then whatever the function is inside of it, the Lambda handler, and then the rest runtime, things like that we're worried about at the moment. But these two things are what are making, are what kind of declare how the structure of the folder works. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. Until
Okay,
there,
all right.
it's. I think we have all done it.
Yeah. So I'm not teaching anything new, and I get that. I'm like, whoa, this is magic, Eric. So no, yeah. So, but it's important to understand that, because I think where a lot of folks run into is they may set their code URI to the root.
Oh yeah.
And then not know how to get to the function, or the system doesn't know how to get to their application. Okay, so that's one way, and that's a suggested way. You can do that, but this isn't really terribly scalable, right? Because one function per folder, you can do that. It works great. It's great. Hello world. This is great for a cron event. Hey, I'm going to trigger this one Lambda, things like that, right?
So if you have functions that are sharing code, this doesn't kind of work either.
That's exactly right. So let's do another one here. So I'm going to do SAM init. And this time I'm going to choose my quick start templates. Same, I'm going to do node again. But this time I'm going to let's go SAM app 2. This time I'm going to say the web backend. So I'm choosing number 8. Okay. So let me show you the structure of this one. This one is more, hey, I want to push this to production, right? So the structure of this one is different. Notice my tests are sitting outside of my folder. My events are sitting. So I've now started isolating these, right? Hey, here's my tests. I can do all my tests. Here's my events. I can do all my events. This is looking more like you might set up something for like Express or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then under now also notice that my package manager is in the root. Okay. So if I go to my source, I have, and I generally get rid of this handlers folder. I just think that's an abstract folder I don't need. But I have 3 functions in the same folder. Okay, so let me talk about the advantages of this real quick. Number 1, I can go in here. So let's say I want to install, I'm going to do npm. Let's get rid of it. So we've kind of seen all this. I'm going to get rid of it so you can see it. So I'm going to go into this real quick.
Yeah, that's
now I warned you.
npm install in the parent folder of your project how many times, and then you're like,
exactly. So here's what we're going to talk about: sharing packages. If I had done it in SAM app 1, I would need to go into each function folder and install the dependencies, right? Okay, but on this one, I can do npm I, and let's just do the AWS SDK. And so now what I'm doing is I'm putting that right in the root. So I can actually look at the package .json, and that's, so you can see my AWS SDK is in there. And then the fun thing about that is, because that is in the root of my project, and that's where the package manager is, if I add the dependency to any of these folders, they're going to grab from the same, they're going to see that npm. Right, or the npm folder under the node modules. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing. This is great locally, right? Okay, so I don't have to install it, like that. So, and this is going to be great locally. I'm doing SAM local invoke, SAM local start API. They're all going to pull from that folder, and they're sharing the same resource. But when they deploy, what happens?
Everything gets packed together. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. Well, it gets packaged. Let's actually show folks how that works, and I'm gonna kill these because I'm losing. So Chris Munn's side moment here. I mentioned my boss, Chris Munn's, amazing developer advocate, smart guy. He works with approximately 200 to 300 tabs in his window. I cannot do that. I am a clean freak. Have to clean everything up. So there you go. So deal with my OCDs as we're doing this here. Okay. So what we're gonna do? Let's go back into the SAM app 2. All right. So if I do a SAM build just from the root, it's going to go out, it's going to build these out.
Maybe now, we can explain what is the SAM build and SAM package and SAM deploy, because I think that generates so much confusion. So maybe we can start from there.
It does. So I want to take you back about a year. Okay, when people were starting to really get into SAM, you can notice that it's all built here. Take it back about a year. We used to have SAM. You had SAM build. So what SAM build does, and let's use this to show, it will actually prepare the artifacts for deployment. Okay, so that's really what it does. If you're using one of the supported compiled runtimes, then it'll actually compile. It'll use the .NET utility or the Java utility based on how you're doing it. And it'll compile the language for you. If you're using something like Node or Python that doesn't need compiling, then it just kind of packages it and it'll get all the dependencies. And you can do you can tell it to ignore some things. There's a lot of flexibility there. But it copies those all over to the .aws SAM folder. Okay. Now if you'll notice in here, under a build folder, here's my get all items, and here's everything required for that particular function. Okay, everything. Now I can go in and tell it to ignore tests, ignore events, because these are all for test things. But here's the node modules that are required. Now when I go into the get by ID function, here's the node modules again, and it's the same thing again. And I think this is where people get kind of frustrated, is because they want to think in the fact of, hey, it's my local machine, I know where that is, so I just want everything to point to the same. I don't want to be redundant in my dependencies. Well, there's not a way to get around that without going to layers, which we can talk about in a minute. The final, and I've heard people banging their heads against the wall on this, and people working on it. The absolute authoritative answer in my head, I don't know if I'm authoritative or not, but is there's not a good way to do that. When you package the Lambda, it has to have all its dependencies, because Lambdas are ephemeral, completely isolated compute, constructs, right? Yeah. I may get beat up for compute constructs. I don't think that's the right word we use, but Lambda functions, right? I'm going to hear from Chris. So it needs all its dependencies. Okay, even when we do a layer, which again we'll talk about, it grabs those and puts them down with the function. So the end result is every function has to have its own dependencies. So really, it's more about locally managing, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things, at least, that I hear frustration from people is that, well, you might have, like, the first function might, for example, use something like Lodash, and then the other ones don't use it. And Lodash, or something even fatter and bigger, like a dependency. Yeah. And how you can not upload that in your other functions, that's something that it's painful for some developers. And when you have very big dependencies, it becomes a hurdle. Now with EFS, you can avoid it somehow, but if you want to keep it like as clean as possible, then it's something that...
and you want to keep it out of a VPC.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's, EFS requires VPC, so that's a limitation there, right? And to me, I don't want that trade-off. Yeah, that is the issue. If I want specific dependencies per specific function, then I go back to the hello world example that we were talking about. That's where we isolate those dependencies, right? So because if I go over there, I can actually copy that and have different dependencies for that second function. Okay. Then it'll build those separately, and so that's just the way it is right now. I can't tell you, that's on our minds is how do we help developers reduce package size. These are things we talk about, and so and we're constantly listening to developers on, hey, here's what we want, and when you're building hello worlds, it's not a big deal, but as you said several times, when you're building enterprise applications, redundancy and dependencies, unneeded dependencies that's just not something we want. So
but that's something that I think with layers is a way that at least you can select, as you were saying, which layer you apply to each function. So then you can at least bring that dependency to the right function when needed. And maybe you have a demo for us, so you will show it in a moment.
Glad to show that in a minute. Let me finish it.
One thing I want to ask, how you can ignore like the tests, the events, or things like that when you're doing a SAM build? Like you mentioned
So
it,
there's
so.
and this doesn't work for every language, and I can't tell you which at the moment. It's probably something I need to look up. Under the npm ignore, I can
Okay,
actually
so
set which ones to ignore here. So
it
let
comes
me go back.
from the npm package manager or whatever package
Well,
manager you're using.
that's exactly right. Yep. So when I do SAM build, if I were to do SAM build in SAM app 1, then those tests wouldn't show up there.
Yeah, because for
So
example, if you are used to serverless framework, you can do those package ignores inside
right.
the serverless framework YAML. And then a lot of people, when they are moving to SAM, there's like, where I can do this? And the answer
Yes.
is from your npm
Yeah.
ignore in this case.
Yep. That's exactly right. So I want to go back. You said, hey, can you explain the build and package and deploy? So I don't want to leave that hanging real quick.
Yes.
So I talked about build and what build does. Build prepares your artifacts, compiled, uncompiled, different things like that. And there's different ways that can be done, even custom build with makefiles. And if we have time, I'm glad to show an example of that. The second thing, and this again, I'm going to take you back a year, is we have this command called SAM package. Now, the package still exists, or that command still exists. And his job, or their job, or it was to say, okay, you point me to your artifacts. I will zip all that up. I will upload it to an S3 folder, and then I will update the YAML file to the S3 folder location so that it's ready when you deploy this. It's ready to be deployed. And so that's still very handy in CI/CD when we just want to package artifacts and not deploy from a CLI, right? So, and then the last thing is SAM deploy, which we've updated. We went through and updated right before re:Invent last year, and it's beautiful.
That's my favorite launch from the CLI.
It is, yeah. I was so excited about it. SAM build -G, or just SAM. I'm sorry, SAM deploy. SAM deploy will actually package that up for you, the artifacts. It doesn't do the build, so you still need to build externally. But what I do is I do SAM build and SAM deploy. That's how I do it. But SAM build will actually take the artifacts and it does all that packaging under the hood. So it's all kind of combined into one. And it saves, if you do the -G or the -- guided, you can tell it to save like any parameters I'm passing in, the bucket I'm dropping it in, things like that. The other cool thing we did with that is we moved bucket management. We took on the aspect of managing the bucket.
Finally.
You no longer, exactly. Yeah, exactly. When that came out, when they told me this was coming, I literally danced around my office, and I wanted to tell people so bad because I mean, it's like, why do I have to manage the bucket? So yes, the bucket, and then the saving of the parameters is crazy helpful. So those are the three commands that we use.
So basically, if you're using it in your computer, SAM build, SAM deploy. If you're using it in, I don't know, code build or something, maybe you do SAM build and then SAM package. And then somebody else CloudFormation will take care of doing the deploy for you.
Exactly right, and that's one of the things I love. When I first started doing CI/CD, and maybe this is a segue, but when I first started doing continuous integration, continuous deploy, and I was actually using Serverless at the time, and they're partners of ours. We love them, but I couldn't output that CloudFormation. I didn't want to deploy from the code build instance. To me, that just felt weird, and I felt like I was losing some visibility to it. So with these, and Serverless does it now as well, with the ability to just output a CloudFormation template and then use the change set and deploy, get that visibility in CI/CD, I think that's critical, and that's one of the reasons we left the package in.
Yeah, and I think that's when you combine it with CodePipeline and code build, that you can build a very strong, and we will talk a little bit about code deploy later in today's. It's another of the building legs of this deployment thing.
That's right.
So are you ready to move to monorepos, or?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yes, because I'm interested in those, at least in what is a structure for a monorepo.
Okay. So, and again, so we've kind of already touched on that because we're talking about, what is our end game? What is, from a management perspective, what is my end game and how do I want to manage these? Am I okay with grouped? Because it's really all about dependencies. Again, it's like I said earlier, it's all about management. You know what I mean? I don't want to duplicate dependencies, but in the end, unless I'm doing, in the end, really, I'm going to have duplicate in there. So it's really what comes down to the easiest way of managing your applications. My preference, I'm going to be opinionated here,
Sure.
is this second way that we were talking about, SAM App 2. Right, and this is, I believe, the basis for a mono repo that you can do. Now, one of the things you were talking about when we said, because I asked you, what do you define as a mono repo? Because you can put 100 people in a room and you get 105 answers, right? So in this, in fact, I'll ask you again. How do you define a mono repo?
Well, I think what is in my head of a mono repo is that we will have inside the main application on the main repo, we will have different directories. That one will be SAM App 1, SAM App 2, SAM App 3, and in there each of them will have a template file and different functions, and each of these directories will be kind of independent from each other. They will be like little microservices. That's what I think about when I think about serverless mono repos. I don't know what you think.
Okay. No, and that makes sense. So one of the ways that I often hear it is a mono repo is my front end and my back end are in the same repo as well.
We can talk about that as well.
Yeah. So how I would approach that, if I wanted a mono repo, now I'm going to tell you, my opinion is I tend to break them down. And one of the things we talk about, and you can call this best practice, or you can just call this Eric's opinion. In my head, they may not be the same, but we tend to, when we talk about how you break down applications, we really encourage folks to say, find logical breaks. Find, is an API gateway, all the Lambda functions, I didn't say Lambdas, edit that out, okay? All the Lambda functions, Chris gives me a really hard time about that, are under the same API gateway, then those make sense in the same applications. But if this set of Lambda functions or serverless application has nothing to do with this one other than maybe they fall into the same umbrella application, then I'd probably separate them just for manageability, for smaller release codes, things like that. But let's say if we wanted to do a mono repo, which a lot of folks are, and there's some great arguments for it as well, is, hey, I just want one repo, I want that location, I want to be able to hop around, hey, I'm working in this one, now I can go to this one without having to open a new application, so on and so forth. Okay.
Now it's very trendy thing. That's why it came to my mind. I'm not a mono repo person, just for disclaimer. I always like to have these logical microservices, as I call them, as different independent repository. Maybe I work in enterprises for too long, but for me, the idea of having everything in one repo is like, why? If I'm not touching that code, I don't need it. But it's trendy. A lot of people are talking about it, and I'm getting a lot of questions about it. So I will just proxy the questions to you.
All right. So let's take our SAM App 2. First thing we need to point out is we have in this one, we already have our build spec file. Okay. So build spec is for code build, right? And that's, now you may be doing something else. I use the code build. That's I've always, when the day code build came out, I said, that's it. That makes sense to me. But I know we have we have people that are diehard Jenkins fans, Hudson fans, Team City, lots of others, and that's fine.
Let's talk about code build because that's the one I know.
There you go. That's what we talk, right? But this can apply to a lot of them. So this is the command set this is the spec file for code build. And I won't break down what it does, other than to know that it runs. So we do our npm install. We do we do CloudFormation package. And just so you know, SAM package is the same as CloudFormation package, and so it's just a wrapper for it. And then it creates the archive, right? It zips it up and we export a template. Okay, so his job is to run tests, or this package's job is to run tests, to do deployments, things like that. Okay, so that's our build spec file. Now this is the build spec file for this application that I've built here. Well, what I could conceivably do is I could create a new folder. Maybe I might do this in terminal, it might be easier. We'll call this app 1. Alrighty. So then I'm going to grab Let's grab this one first. Hey, you want to work with me here, buddy?
Maybe.
There we go. All right, so I'm going to take these, and then again, you might do this in the terminal, or you might do it when you create it. And I'm going to drop those in there. Try it again. There we go. All right, so now here's my app one. Okay, so that's our first step to a monorepo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we can have
so now
two
I'm
or three and all the same.
Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, and now I got app 1.1, but we'll call it app 2 because I'm better than that. Okay. All right. So here's our monorepo.
Excellent.
Not huge, but what we're doing. This is all backend at the moment, right? So in each of these, I have a build spec file. Now, one of the cool things that I can do in code build is I can say which build spec file do you want to use, right? So I can have two pipelines. Here's pipeline for application A. Here's pipeline for application B. Both pointed at the same repository, but they read different build spec files, right? So then what happens is I check this in, and it triggers off 1, 2, 5, 10, 30 pipelines, right? And off it goes. So that's. Have you ever done it that way or heard it that way?
Well, I usually what I do it with one repo because that's what I'm used to do. And with CodePipeline, you can start basically building as soon as there is a change in branch. So can you do a change when there is a change in a particular directory? Because, for example, with Amplify, now they have built in this monorepo feature. So you can decide which directory they are looking for. Do you know if there is something like that for CodePipeline?
So this, as far as I know, is going to build the whole thing every time.
Exactly.
So what you would do is and in the pipeline, and this is a 98% sure. I believe you can point to which one, so you might be able. So I don't know if you would use the same pipeline.
Because what I have seen for monorepos in serverless, I have not tried, but I have seen it, is that whenever there is a change in the repo, they have a small pipeline that will grab the code and put it in an S3 bucket, and then depending on the directory of the S3 bucket that has changed, it triggers a new pipeline. So there is like kind of, and everything is generated with code, so you really don't need to write 20 million pipelines, but basically different pipelines will be generated for each of the different projects. I can put the link for this project in the description of the video, and I can share it with you. It's created by one of the serverless specialists in Nordics. Okay. And it's pretty interesting. I was like, wow, because it just does everything very complicated, but it works.
Right.
I can share
So the pipeline, I want to make sure I understand it too. So the pipeline takes, so let's say I've got this monorepo and it has 10 folders, right? 10 apps in it. Okay.
Let me share it with you so we can talk in the same language. There it is.
Alrighty.
And it's even a drawing there.
I'm grabbing it. Oh, it's coming up on my screen, sharing it out. Here it is. So we're sharing it out. Okay.
We can talk about it. So this is the project I was mentioning. And if you zoom, you can see how and also the people watching this can see how it works. So as you see, this interview is we are just randomly talking about things.
It's fine. Yeah, that's good. So here's how I'm reading this. So when they commit to the repository, code build detects changes, runs lint, and does all the things, and then puts the artifacts in a bucket, right? And then those, depending on the folder, those trigger different pipelines. And this is I'm saying the same thing, but I'm not dropping it to a bucket. So what I'm doing is I'm actually, if you take out these, I can't highlight them. No. Take out code. Oh, I'm sorry, you still need code build. So what it would be is it would be a separate code build. Take out S3 bucket, and you would have 3 instances of code build coming up, right? Yeah. So code build to pipeline service A, another code build.
With this pipeline is that it only builds the directory that changed, and that's the interesting thing. So in the case that you were mentioning, we will have basically whenever you do a change to app 1, app 2, and app 3 might start the pipeline, even if they don't continue, but they will just start. In this case, only the pipeline that kind of had changed will start. So that's
So
what
they're doing
I wanted to share with you.
Okay. So the way I'm doing it, so this will work great. So they're doing some detecting to see if the code's changed at the first code build instance, right?
Exactly.
And they're only dropping change stuff in. The other way, the way I was saying it, what it would do is it would build them all in code build, ship it off to CloudFormation, but CloudFormation would kick back anything that doesn't have changes in it.
Exactly.
So this is still a really cool way of doing this. I'd be interested to see the logic they're using to detect changes.
It's the code. Everything is in CDK, so you can check the code on. And the same for the audience. All the links are in the description box, so you can check the code there. And this is a great example. It's built by Nicholas, one of our serverless specialists.
Oh yeah, I know Nicholas. Yeah, he's a sharp developer. Yeah. So this will work well also if you're detecting changes. If you're looking at changes across, then you could go straight code. You could do a separate pipeline for each. But there's not really a way of getting away from separate pipeline for each. That's kind of where you're at. Yeah. With serverless. So so let's go. If you're okay, what if we add a front end to this?
Yes, because that's another common use case. I want my backend and my front end in the same repository.
That's right. So what if we go in and we add, hang on a second here, a new folder, and we just call it front end. Now, we won't build a full front end on this, but I am going to go somewhere.
How you're doing your front end? Are you using Amplify or you are using like static things?
I use Amplify, and I think the Amplify. So let me get on my soapbox for a moment. There's really no reason to do static in an S3 and manage the CloudFront and the GitHub connection and all that yourself. That wheel has been reinvented multiple times, and Amplify, I think, does it the best. That team, they've killed it, and it's great. And so if I can go into the console and I build that out and I connect it, and then there's so many different options. I don't know if are you familiar with the URL shortener that I built?
Yeah, a long time ago you built it.
Yeah, I built it. Earlier this year. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and pop up that code so we can look at it real quick here. The handy thing about this goes into what we're talking about, because I actually do a mono repo on this. Here it is. Oh. Crazy, yeah, I know. So this is my repo. Let me blow it up.
Yes.
Okay. This is the repo for it, and I have the client and ignore the templates because that's just something I was using so people could see that.
But this, to put it in perspective, this URL shortener is built on SAM and also with Amplify.
It's built on, so the back end, this one's kind of fun. The back end is entirely API Gateway and DynamoDB. There's not a single Lambda involved here.
Because in the description it says, without.
That's right. Create service URL shortener on AWS without using Lambda. So my entire backend application are these two files, are the template file and the API file.
Wow.
Okay. So, but I could easily have a source folder here with all my functions in it, just like we were showing earlier, and we have a mono repo. Yeah. So how I did this in my template, I actually create, I'm going to go down here so we can see it. I actually create the Amplify app in CloudFront.
Wow.
I'm sorry. So CloudFormation, thank you, SAM to be exact. But yeah, and I found a blog by Nader Devitt who shows how to do this. I know I don't say his name right, Nader. I apologize. So what I'm doing here is I never had to go into the console, right? I just simply added the app and I point it to my client folder. See, client distribution, and now when I check in this repo, CloudFormation is going to do its thing and launch my backend. It's going to control that, do all the things we just talked about. When I check in, it's going to trigger an Amplify build and rebuild my front end if it's changed.
Wow. I'm going to use this so much because I've been doing it manually, and this is so cool.
I'm going to shoot you a link to this if you want to add it on the
description
thing.
Yeah, the
Yeah, so this will show how to build that up. But this was a way to handle my front end, my back end, and it's kind of a hybrid because they're not completely isolated because the entire application is defined in the same template. But I could conceivably create a second template to build that back end if I wanted to. Because I'm showing people how to build their own URL shortener. This puts it out, but it builds, and the fun thing is it builds now I did manually build the redirects and rewrites. I could go in and add those in as well. But I'm using, back to our Amplify discussion, I'm using Amplify to rewrite. So if you hit slink.url, I can show you real quick here.
So cool.
If I go, I'm sorry, it's slink. I meant slip. Slip.link. This is the URL itself. Okay, and this is my, I can log in. And it's very simple front end. Please don't judge me on my design skills, but there they are. So these are all my URLs that I have built in there. But if I were to do add on an extension, SWS is one, Sessions with SAM. That's doing through a redirect, and here we are. This is back to Sessions with SAM. All that redirect, rewrite, everything is being handled at Amplify. And I didn't have to do, so Amplify is the way to go. If you're not hosting front ends there, it really, and if it's cost thing, think about how much time you're spending to set up those static files and figure out the routing and everything for S3.
And the authentication and everything. It's just
exactly. So
that's so cool.
So that's how I would approach a mono repo if I were to do that. I have my build spec in each file, and then I separate out my front end if I want to add that in. I do it in Amplify. One commit builds everything for your pipelines. That example that Nicholas built is awesome. But the other way, if you want to just launch them all, you can skip that S3 part and just push into single pipelines as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for these type of things, there is as many solutions as developers and companies because it depends on your needs, on what are your requirements. It's not the same if you have massive dependencies as you don't, because if you don't, maybe you don't mind building or uploading or the solutions are very different. But why we don't go into the thing that we promised to do, the sharing of dependencies with layers, because we mentioned it and we never went there.
Oh yeah, my bad. Okay,
no
so let's talk.
We just get out in branches,
Yeah. We're talkers. That's just the way it is. So, all right. So I have this little one this little template I built. Let me bring up a terminal again. All right. So I created this template, this simple template that shows, and this now. This is one of those. This might be unpopular opinion. It might be popular opinion. This is something I do. I find it easy. I find it helpful. So let me show you this. Right. So now I'm going to do SAM init. Okay, and instead of choosing one of the AWS quick templates, I'm going to choose a custom template. And I have several templates that I use. I keep mine in Git, but you can keep them in a path, a zip folder, an HTTPS endpoint, a Mercurial. I don't know anybody who uses Mercurial, but you can do it. So there's my clone. Okay. So now it's asking me, hey, do you want to redo this? That's fine, yeah. And all that was saying is you download that already, you want to get a fresh version.
So basically this Git init with a repo, it just downloads the repo and puts a different name to it. So you don't need to do it manually.
That's right. So I grabbed that down, and now we have this Lambda example. And what I want to do is talk through my template a little bit. First of all, here's my dependencies folder, okay? I have two files in here. One is my dependency package, okay, package.json. So you can see in there, the only dependency I have is, again, the AWS SDK version 2.735, okay? We can do our Lodash, we can do our Moment, we can do all those
whatever you like.
Right, exactly. So we go back here. The other file I have is a data file. This is a static data file. It just holds some things. I've used this. I have a data file that I use when I built a translation app, an asynchronous translation app that used Translate and Poly. And while they support a lot of the same cultures, they're not all the same. So I built a mapping template that said, here's the cross section of the cultures they select. That built my drop down that people can choose. And here for now, I just literally have the color blue.
Good.
All right, so that gives you an idea. So let me show you what that means. All right, so back to my template. So here's how I built my template. Okay, one, I always use globals. I like to put as much as I can in my globals.
Oh yeah.
This is when you're building multiple functions, mono repos, enterprise, use your globals. Set your stuff. You can override this. If I do a different runtime lower down, I can override it, but set your globals. And one of the things is I build a layer. Okay, now this is an app layer, and the idea here is I build 1, 2, or maybe 3 layers per application. Okay, and I'm talking a large application. So my one layer may hold here's my SDK and shared libraries that apply to all my functions. Right now, here's a set of specific shared data that, packages that are just applied to maybe 20% of my functions. Exactly. So I can add that on at the function level. So there we've not loaded every dependency into every function anymore, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do content URI. This says where's the folder, or where the layer is, the contents for the layer, just the description. I want it to delete. Every time I update the layer, I just want you to delete the old layer. I'm not even going to care about the versions right now. Okay, and then the last thing I added was this is new in SAM, was the build method. Okay,
what is that?
So notice, have you used this yet? The build method?
No.
It's very cool. So remember when we set up layers, normally this would have to have my Node.js file. It would have to have all my layers built in, all the content downloaded, ready to go. Well, now what I can do is I can say with SAM, this is the version of the layer I want you to set it up. This should be a Node.js 12.x layer. Okay. Now I also have a function. And all that function does, it just simply kind of logs some stuff out, and I'll show you that in a minute. All right, so let's see this in action so you can kind of see. Okay, so remember, here's my layer example. We have our dependencies layer with just a package manager. So this could be requirements.txt, whatever language you use.
You don't need to prepare that package at all. You just put your package JSON, and that's it.
That's exactly right. So now I'm going to do my SAM build. Okay, so do my SAM build, and it builds it out. All right, so let's look at this now. So under my .aws SAM folder, under my app layer, is all the dependencies and the file structure required for the layer. So now, here's my SDK and all the dependencies on it. It also copied over my data.json file because it says, hey, that's part of your layer, so we'll put that in there, and then my dependency. So I don't always have to manage those. I just say, hey, here's what I want you to build it for, and here's the requirements. Off you go. You can do the make file, and if we have time, we'll show that later, but you can do the make file here as well if you want to custom build a layer with something special.
Yeah, and that's quite used for runtimes, for bringing your own runtime.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I have a Swift example we can look at if we've got time for that. All right, so let's go back to this now. Now that I've built that out and everything's in my SAM folder, I can literally, let's go here, let me clear this so you can see that okay. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
I don't know why the Munson's there. So,
no
all right,
idea.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a SAM local start. I'll make sure I'm in the start API. Now, if you're familiar with this, what this is going to do is it's going to start a local version of the API. Right, and so that API is, and it reads through the template. Now, I've seen this a lot on Twitter, so I do want to explain something real quick here. This is a pretty simple process. It doesn't have all the transform logic, all the things that goes on at CloudFormation. All it does is read the template, find the APIs, and create that endpoint and point it to the right Lambda. Because we're having, I've seen some questions out there. Hey, I've got sub templates. I'm using sub applications. Those aren't working locally. No, it doesn't do all that logic. It just simply fires up the API. Whew. Okay, so we've got this running. So now what we can do is let me fire up another terminal. Okay, so I'm actually going to pull this down so we can see both real quick here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a curl -v, and then I'm going to hit our endpoint, which is just localhost 3000. Now watch what happens. And I'm going to pull this down just a bit so you can see it. Okay. Now, let me get back in there so I can hit enter. Now, note, it's grabbing, it's building that layer image. And then it built so it built everything I needed. So if I'm using layers locally, that's invoked as well. And so let's walk this real quick here. It built the layer image. Okay, it didn't need to pull anything else. Well, it's hard to scroll, sorry. Then it mounts the function, and then it invokes it as if it's being hit from API gateway. And notice, here's my app version, so you can see, and let me show you, I'll show you the code in just a minute. Here's the API version, so I know the dependency's working. And here's the color. I know that I was able to access that static data. So let me show you the code on that. So if we go into my function, so this function's very simple. So first of all, I'm making a requirement. I'm pulling in the AWS SDK. Line 2, I'm making a requirement. Build data, and I'm pulling in that static data. Then in my response, I'm simply responding with AWS.version, which is the version of the API or the SDK, and I'm grabbing the color out of the template. So this shows you how the library is loaded. So I don't have to give us reference to the library because it knows, because it's Node, I know where to grab that. Excellent. But it also shows you under opt, under Node.js, there's a file called data, and that tells you how to access static data as well. And so with this, I can put, and so I can add another function. So if I go back here and I copy this, and you know, for time's sake, we won't do it, but I can literally go under my source. I can say my function 2, and I don't have to add a second set of dependencies. I know because in my template, I'm giving every layer that latest one. They'll always be the latest. There you go. So that's another way of sharing dependencies with a layer, and you can obviously do an external layer as well. I could go down here and say, I have a dependencies layer out there that never changes, and I would just do the layer ARN, and it would include those as well.
Exactly, and this was very interesting because when I talked to you when we were prepping, you were like layers. I was like, layers for dependencies, like this type of dependency management. I thought about dependency manager for layers, but not just to decide like how, like it was an interesting thought for me because I was like, yeah, sure, dependency management, but I was thinking like big dependencies or things like that, but not just for sharing the right dependencies to the right functions. And I think it's an interesting use case of layers.
Yeah, so I can, and down here, if I go down to this function, I can add a layers property as well, and the same thing, and I can add a one-off here. So just for that layer, it pulls that one. So layers are very powerful, and there are folks who say, "Oh no, don't associate a layer with the application," and that may be, but I find it very, because I don't have to do Webpack here. Yeah. I don't have to shake the tree. I don't have to do anything.
Webpack
I know
very
that
painful.
is going to be there.
And more if you're a backend developer, it's something that you're not maybe used to, and it's just very hard to configure. So if you can avoid it, I will.
Yep, and I'm the same way. I find this is a very easy way to build those. And if I approach it in a strategy and I say, here's one layer that's global to my company, you have to have these different things. Here's another one that's just for my app, you have to have these. You can do up to 5 layers, right? Yeah. And here's another one that's just for separate functions. So I can layer those up, and then I'm not loading every Lambda with everything.
Exactly.
So I've started goofing around with building Swift. I'm not an iOS developer. I want to be an iOS developer. I'm learning to be an iOS developer. But some really cool work has been done by some folks out there. There's a developer by the name of Fabian Fett who helped build out, and Tom Dorn from Apple, where they're building out AWS Lambda Swift, or the Swift Lambda runtime, right? And so I thought, man, what if we could do that in SAM? That we should be able to do it with the custom runtime. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go into Swift here. And so let's look at the template really quick. There's 2 files I'm going to show you, and it might be a little confusing. But so in Swift, I'm setting this for a custom runtime. This is my function. Now, again, I've done my globals. and I'm saying the handler is Swift Bootstrap. Now, the reality of a custom runtime is it always has to be Bootstrap. So I can put, hey, my name is Eric there, and it'll still look for Bootstrap, right? Yeah. And then the critical part is saying that this runtime is provided. So it's going to load that up, and there you go. And now with the latest release, we can do provided.al2 to run on AL2 as well.
Exactly.
So,
yep. Yeah, Amazon Linux machine too, just for the ones that.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Yes. So this would run on Amazon Linux, and if I were to change this to .al2, that would run on Amazon Linux too.
Yeah.
All right. So then down here. This is just a regular, I'm passing in a DynamoDB table. It's a regular function at this point. But the one critical part is back to this metadata.
Exactly.
And instead of doing build method Java or Node, I'm saying makefile. And that tells SAM, look for makefile in this folder, wherever the code URI is. So it's going to look in the root for the code. So let's look at that makefile. Real quick here. Now here's where it can get a little crazy the way SAM works, and I'm gonna try to explain this, and you can say, Eric, that doesn't make sense, and I'll try again. But SAM does some things when it's building. First thing it does is in a SAM build, it takes. So let's say I'm sitting in a folder, an application folder. It takes wherever that root, wherever the code URI is. It says I'm going to copy that whole folder structure into a temporary folder. I'm going to do all the builds, and then I'll
that temporary folder is the .aws SAM.
No. Here's the fun part. It's actually in a temp var user. It's a temporary folder that'll get blown away. Then what'll happen is it outputs the artifacts into the .aws SAM file. So that's interesting to know, especially when you're trying to move folders around. Okay. So one of the challenges I had with building Swift is if I do a Swift build, it will compile the Swift. I can do it on my Mac, or I can use a container and do it on Linux, and that's what we'll do here. And it caches those deployments, right? And so the next time I build, it'll just do deltas. But if I do SAM build, because it copies it over to a brand new folder, there's no such thing as a cache or change. And so what I found is every time I did SAM build, it was a full deploy. So what I needed to do was find a place that both of those would build so that they would always be cached. And that's under the .aws SAM build folder, right? Okay. So how SAM does this, did that make sense so far? Because it's kind of complex.
At least for me, it does. I hope for the people watching this, it does as well.
Okay. So let's go back to our SAM. If I have these built anything. Which one? Yeah. Well.
One?
All right. So I must have blown it away. That's. Yeah. Oh, here. Okay. Under AWS SAM, you can see it right here. So the way SAM does this is it creates under the .aws-SAM folder, it creates a build file, and then it puts each of the functions in its own folder underneath, and it copies over the template and updates the template. Every time I build, it blows this away.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't want to build anything in there. So what I do is I build separate folders for each one as staging areas. Then the last thing I do is I copy it over to here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So then whether I'm building from within Swift using just the make build or SIM, it's cached into this folder and I'm good to go. Or if I build with SAM build, it's cached into this folder and I'm good to go. All right, so with that being explained, and I'm glad to clarify that. I know that's kind of confusing. I plan to do a whole blog on this.
Yeah, you should, because this sounds very interesting. And also, not only for the Swift people, but also to understand how SAM works.
How SAM build, right, custom runtimes, yeah. So here's how this works. This is the makefile. So what I'm doing in this is the only thing as a developer you would have to change is you add the name of your function. You say... this SAM always requires build-function name, whatever's in the template. So I add that, and I tell it, when you do that, run builderbot. And that's in makefile, that's a target. So here's the target of builderbot. And then I do some logic, and I won't go through all this, but basically what this does is it says, here's the product folder, and it builds that, it removes build from it to get the product name. And then it gives me a build directory. Here's how I want you to build it every time. Here's where I want you to stage it. This is where I could kind of put everything together. And then here's where I want you to export it when everything's done. And that's the .aws SAM build folder product name. Then what I do is I actually go out and I do the compile. And this is the one that matters. This actually uses a Docker to build the application. And this one copies over any dependencies required. And then it copies in place. So, and in this, I'll send you a link to this. Anyone's welcome to go in and kind of dig around in this to get more. But the idea is once that's all done, then I can go back. Let me bring up a terminal again. And if I go into CD sessions, SAM, Swift, okay. So if I go in here, and one I could do SAM build. So it's going to actually fire that makefile, and it builds each function separately. And because they're cached, it's going to happen pretty quick. And there you go. So that build. Now, if those weren't cached, if this were brand new, and this is a big old honky development machine. That's why I use Cloud9. That would take a little while. It takes a little while to build out. But the other thing I can do is if I'm just developing one of them, I can do make, build, and then one of my functions is called Swift. API. So then it's only going to build the one, but it's going to build it based on the cache from earlier, and there you go. So that's how custom runtimes using the makefile. The critical parts of that, and I want to pull that up, is, and I'll actually show a different example. This one here does Go. This is under the AL2. This is how you would do Go under AL2. And the makefile is very simple. It simply says, set the architecture that you want to build to, so Linux Go build, and then, set the architecture, then do a Go build, and then copy hello world, which is output by Go, into the artifacts directory, which SAM build will always declare that artifacts directory, / call it bootstrap, and there you go. So that's using a makefile in custom build. And that's a lot, and like I said, I'm going to do a blog around this, glad to answer questions, but any questions you have? Did this make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and I think you can also exploit the makefile not only for custom runtimes, but also for maybe building a little bit different. For example, if you were building these Swift individual functions, usually when you do some build, it builds everything, but sometimes you just want to maybe build the ones that change or the ones that you are interested in. And then I think you can explode that, because I think that's not a function in SAM yet, that you can just say which function you want to build.
That's right, and that's what I did, and that's why I have this. So SAM build builds them all, make build function name builds just the one. Yeah, exactly. Right. Makefile gives you
even if you are not using Swift, you can just use it for your Node.js apps just to build functions that you are interested, because that's something people wants to do. And I think the last discussion I want to have with you is something that I got asked a lot, and I also have faced, that is changing a little bit the topic from some package and some build when we go to do safe deployments. Because when we do safe deployments, we use CodePipeline, we use usually this Canary or Linear, or what was the other one, All-in. Or I don't know what, that
all at once,
yes, that give us different deployment methods. And usually when we are having like a stage and production and testing, or development, staging and production, let's put it in the right order. For development, we don't want to use Canary, because it might take like 90 minutes, 1 hour, I don't know, long time to deploy our application. We want it to deploy all at once, but when we are going to production, we want to start swifting the traffic slowly and having all the alarms and all the fancy things. And that's something I'm interested to know if there is a solution for that. Like we can have different scenarios for...
There is, and we're going to use some intrinsic functions and some CloudFormation wizardry. But so I have. It's funny you ask, because I think I told you I do my sessions with Sam, and one of the things I covered was safe deploys, or people call them fractional deploys, or there's all kinds of different names for them. But we call them safe deploys internally, and that's what I call them. And I'm going to show you the code real quick here. Actually, we'll just use my application to build this. So let's kind of do It's under my sessions with Sam. And this repo, I'll shoot you a link to this repo. This repo is wide open for anybody to look at. So, and it's we update it every week, every Thursday when we do the session with Sam. So I just sent you a link to that as well. So here's what you're able to do. So let's go into the safe deploys, and we're going to look at our template. Okay. And the safe deploy is done at a function level. So each Lambda function can have its own approach to how it's going to deploy, right? Yeah. Now, a couple things to understand. Let's say I have 30 Lambda functions in this template, and all of them have a safe deploy. One of them fails, they all roll back.
Oh.
So that's something to understand. Yeah, so the whole stack or application rolls back. I didn't know that until I tested it. And I've tested that, and it's like, yep. So
but that makes sense, because in general, at least how I think about, at least how I usually think about my microservice, my logical microservice, that is everything that belongs in one template, is that it's not independently deployed. And like my logical microservices are independently deployed, but not my internal things. They are not independently deployed. So if one fails, it makes sense that everything fails.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's another reason for logically separating. You know what I mean? That's another reason for finding these logical separations. Because while these Lambdas are going to be interconnected, the Lambda functions rely on each other, not coupled. So we don't call one from another. But if this Lambda function has a specific data structure that this one's expecting through like EventBridge or SQS, then we want them to either both go out or not. So
and they might share like spec dynamo changes or things like that. So different resources. So we don't want them to go one and the other or not. It's confusing.
That's right. All right, so let me show you how it's kind of done. So I'm going to go here. Let me find my function. So this is just my function. I call it base function. Very clever naming system. Oh, yeah. And here's the code we care about. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I have this thing called deployment preferences. Then I give it a type. Okay. And I really actually you don't have to do these if you want, but I do, because I was showing how do I trigger different events. I wanted to trigger deployment start, success. So I just get inundated with notices once this kicks off. But this is what we care about. Okay. So in this, I can do all at once. I could do linear 10% every 1 minute. I could do canary 5% for 10 minutes, whatever. Did you know you can create your custom themes on this?
Oh, I didn't know that there was new ones.
Yeah, you can go into code build and create your own. So let's say I want canary for 1% every 3 hours.
Wow.
Why you would do that, I don't know, but it's an example. So you can create your own and then use these, and you just use the name, right?
Okay, cool.
So what this really is I want to use linear 10% every 1 minute on production. Yes. But I want to use all at once on everything else, right? Exactly. So this is what because all at once means that's the default. If I don't have a deployment preference in there, the default is all at once. Exactly. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use some conditions. So first of all is I'm going to create a parameter. And I'm going to go in here, and we're just going to call it environment. And you got to watch my spelling; it's horrible.
Oh.
Okay. So we're going to set the type. This is just hello. This is just a string. And so we'll go string, and then we're going to set a default on this. Now, here's my cautionary tell: never set the default to your production environment.
No.
Always set the default to dev, and then you can override it when you're ready to do something else, or something like that. Yeah. All right. So when I deploy this, then I'm gonna have to pass that environment in, right?
Exactly.
And I can do that through a parameters override, just in the CLI line, or in my code build. So down here, we're going to actually and I need to add a condition. So, all right. So we're gonna add a condition as well. So let me go down here to conditions. Okay. And I'm doing this by memory, so if you look at that and go, oh, that's not right. I think it's right. So,
doing CloudFormation by memory, it's really brave.
Exactly. So we're just going to say prod. We'll say is prod. Okay. So simply is prod, and then we're going to say we're going to do bang equals. So this is the YAML version of our intrinsic functions, and then how we're going to do that is we're going to say we're going to ref our environment string. So we're going to ref environment. Okay.
Yeah, and you wrote wrong environment.
It's just,
Don't worry,
I've always said
environment is the hardest word in the planet.
Yeah. And so what we're expecting is prod. Okay, and let me scroll that up because I think about. All right, so that's all we're saying is, hey, if it is prod, if this equal, and bang equals a lot of times if you're a coder, it's like, well, that means not equals. In YAML on CloudFormation, that means equals, right? That's just calling out the equal stuff. So we're saying is prod will be true if I reference the environment parameter and it equals prod. So there you go. So down here, back to our all at once thing. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a condition, and we're going to say, we're going to if this. So we say if, okay, and then we're going to say prod, is prod. So we're referencing that is prod. We're referencing that condition, okay? So if it is
it's prod.
Seriously here. Yeah, there we go. I got it. So if it is that condition, then we're going to pass linear, and look at that.
There's an A.
Okay. All right, there we go. Yeah. Okay. If it's not, then we're going to do all at once, and
that's so simple.
Yeah, that should work. I'm going to be a full disclosure. I haven't tried this, but yeah, that's how conditionals work, and you should be able to use this without a problem there. So you can just say, yeah, I'm going to load that in, and when we're off, I'm going to give this a shot, and we'll update it if there's any changes.
That's really cool, and it's very simple. I have a couple of videos on showing how to hook those environmental variables with CodePipeline. So then with that and that, then you can have your own.
There you go. That's right.
Lovely deployment, depending on, and I will definitely try it in my next talk because this is something it's so simple and so nice. So those are my favorite.
Yeah. This, when you first asked me, I was like, oh, that makes sense. There should be a way. So this should work for you. So,
yeah, this is awesome.
There you go.
I think with that, we can wrap up the interview before we go to 3 hours of content, because I'm pretty sure forever. I can keep on asking things forever.
This is fun for me.
But I think this was amazing, and I can ask questions all day long because I'm a ball of questions all the time. So it's really great to have someone that have answers, or at least someone to just talk about it, because
to work it out together.
Yeah, that sometimes I find these interviews are a very selfish thing because I can get to ask all my questions.
But you know what? That's not true, though, because what I have found is if I have the question, somebody else does too. So yeah.
People watch these videos, so I think I'm not the only one with the questions.
That's right.
Yeah, but it was great, Eric. I'm really happy that you were able to answer all my random questions on CI/CD and deployments of SAM, because it's something that keeps me awake a lot, because it's one of my favorite topics. So I dig into these things a lot. So and people ask me these questions because I speak a little bit about this. So it's really nice to get.
Yeah, I think you're being modest. I've found a ton of CI/CD from you, of helpful CI/CD. So yeah. Thanks for having me. This was a blast for me. I could talk about this stuff forever.
So you're welcome any other time with other topics. Let's put some topic that is rounded, so we don't go to the branches and we talk about the life of unicorns.
That's right.
But you're welcome anytime in the channel, and you also have your own YouTube channel, and also you have a stream like Twitch. You're very active in Twitch. That's why you can live code. I can.
Oh man, I fat finger with the worst of them, but we keep going. Yeah, we have. It's actually our developer advocate YouTube channel, and we have yours on it as well. So, but we post, if you're looking for it, it's youtube.com AWS Serverless.
Links are in the description box.
Good, excellent. and we cover a lot of stuff. And I do a stream called Sessions with Sam. It's every Thursday, and we just cover tons of how do I do that in SAM? And it's usually the template. Sometimes it's CLI, but usually it's things like how do I do conditionals in safe deploys. So we cover a lot of that, and then everything I build is saved in the Sessions with Sam repo, which you have a link to there.
Yeah, those Sessions with Sam, I really like it. I know you also put them in YouTube, so I can always watch them in European-friendly time zones.
There, there it is. Yeah, where are you based?
I'm in Helsinki, so usually it happens kind of late in the day, and it's maybe not. I don't want to start watching work things, but it's always in YouTube, so you can always reference it later when you have the problem. So,
sure.
But thank you very much, and I'm super happy that you were here today.
Yeah, we'll have to trade out. You'll have to come be on my show sometime.
Oh yeah, sure. Don't make me live code. That's the only requirement.
Yeah, you got a live code. No, nobody has to do anything. So that'd be great. Thanks for having me.
If I don't have to do anything, I'm happy to go there.
That's how we roll.
Thank you.
Sounds great. You bet. Bye-bye.
This was the video for today. I hope you like it. If you did, give a big thumbs up and let me know in the comment box below who you would like me to interview next. I'm making my full kind of calendar of interviews, so I have quite a lot of open slots still to get people and topics that you're interested in listening to. And I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!